Ruth and Naomi. In the book of Genesis, they give us the story of Abraham and Sarah. In that case, God was working with the whole world, and there he narrows it down to working with one nation. Later on, Jacob gives a blessing to all of his sons, and with that, he narrows it down to one tribe, the tribe of Judah. Now with this story, with Ruth, and later on talk about Ruth and Boaz, it narrows it down to one clan within that tribe. With David, it narrows it down to one family. And finally, in the New Testament, it narrows it down to Joseph and Mary, and especially Mary, the individual. In the English Bible, Ruth comes after the book of Judges, and for the purpose, the fact that it happened during the time of the Judges. In the Hebrew Bible, Ruth comes after Proverbs. The end of Proverbs asks the question, who can find a virtuous woman? And then you have Ruth, right there. Makes sense. A little bit of the geography. We talked earlier about how there's a mountain ridge that goes right down through the middle of Israel. And along the top of that ridge are some major cities, Hebron and Bethlehem and Jerusalem and Bethel and on up. Well, these are all located either just a little bit on the west side, which is the green side, or a little bit on the eastern side, which is the dry side. Both Bethlehem and Jerusalem are located a little bit on the eastern side, which is the dry side. One big difference is that both of them now are actually facing this huge chasm which goes down to the Jordan River, 1,200 feet below sea level, and in the Dead Sea, and then lifts up again going up to Moab and Ammon and all that area. In Jerusalem, they look to the east and they don't see this chasm, they see the Mount of Olives. But in Bethlehem, nothing is there. You can look out, and on a clear day, you can actually look right across that chasm over to the other side and see Moab, which means that Elimelech, who is the head of the family here, he's looking across and he knows where he's going. Later on, Ruth, the rest of her life, on a clear day, she could look across the chasm and see where she came from. Bethlehem is on the dry side, and it's the home base of shepherds, which uses the dry side of the mountain. And that's their main industry. But there's a ring of fertile soil right around Bethlehem. They get about 24 inches of rain per year. And their main crops are barley and wheat, which are part of this entire story. But a year of famine, you can get through that. And the area is given for famine. It was a constant struggle. 2 years of famine was desperate. But 3 years, it was absolutely impossible. After 3 years of famine, people needed to decide what are they going to do. Now, shepherds could get by, but the people who worked the soil, this was a problem. They would do different things. They would maybe go down to Hebron or go more on the eastern side or whatever. They could do something to get by. Elimelech, he looked across that chasm. He saw Moab, probably got news that there was rain over there. Wouldn't go permanently, would just go for a little bit. He was probably a wealthy man. He was a landowner. He could afford to maybe go over there for a little bit, take his boys with him, his wife and his sons, go across a little bit, and then come back when things get better, just like those going to other areas. There was actually 2 ways to go, but his route was probably going down to En-Gedi, and then go south along the Dead Sea to Masada, which would later on be called that. It was called the fortress at that point. Then he could ferry across the Dead Sea at the shallow part between the northern part of the Dead Sea and the southern part, and then go up the other side to Moab. As I say, he probably wasn't planning to stay there for long, but in a very short amount of time, he dies. And the two boys get married. They marry Moabite women, which means they're settling in. They're going to stay there. 10 years go by, and after all that time, they die. The two boys die, and Naomi hears news that it's time to go back. They left probably with pretty good wealth, from what we can tell. They're going back poor. We can tell that by how the women greet Naomi. They say, "Is this Naomi?" Now, Jewish tradition reads a lot into that and the way it's stated. They basically are saying, "Is this you? When you left, you were lovely," which means that she was a little bit fatter. But now you're drawn. Look at your clothes. You left with expensive clothes. You're coming back in rags. Actually, the word used there, you're coming back barefooted. Now, that doesn't mean that she didn't have anything on her feet. It just means that she was poor. She was dressed poorly. You ate expensive food and had servants, but look at you now. You're poor. Is this Naomi? Well, she was poor, although she did own land. But unfortunately, in that day and age, possession is 9/10 of the law. When the family left the land, someone else moved in. Now, they didn't take ownership, but they started to take care of the land. Things need to be done every year. 10 years have gone by. 10 years of working that land, of removing rock, of building walls, to terracing the thing, to fertilize it, to irrigate the thing. I mean, 10 years of work of making that land more valuable than it was before. Now the family comes back and he's just going to hand it over? I don't think so. By right, she could claim it, but only if she redeemed it. And that's the key word for the entire book of Ruth. She had to redeem the land, and she couldn't afford to do so. It would take a member of her clan to step in that had a little bit of money and redeem that land. And of course, that takes us into the next story. So come back when we give you more insights on the rest of this story.